very good evening and a very warm welcome to Super Saturday. I'm Akanksha Swaroop. Let's dive into this segment with some breaking inputs coming in. All right, we're bringing you an inside scoop on the Manipur all-party meet. According to sources in the Home Ministry, CNN News 18 is learning that all political parties have sensitively and apolitically given their suggestions for restoration of peace in Manipur, and the Government of India will consider these suggestions with an open mind. According to Home Ministry sources, Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi has been constantly monitoring the situation in Manipur since day one. Let's quickly go across to our correspondent Arunima, who's joining me on the phone line. Arunima, this meet is only an acknowledgement of the fact that the situation, or rather normalcy in Manipur, cannot be restored till it's a collective effort.
I think having realized that government reached out to the opposition parties, there was this lack of trust in the N. Biren Singh government, which was flagged off. Priyanka Chaturvedi of Shiv Sena, Uddhav Thackeray faction spoke about it. TMC, it started on an attacking note, said that, this meeting is quite late and immediately there should be arrangements made for the all-party delegation to visit Manipur, and this should happen within the week so that all parties can go there and see for themselves. But what the government has, told all the political parties is that we must work together to bring peace. The good news that they have conveyed is that since 13th of this month, there has been no death in Manipur. So far, about 1,800 looted weapons have been surrendered. So that's also a huge plus, given the fact that private people, civilians have now taken up arms and they are guarding Kuki villages and Meitei villages and firing at each other. So if that source of arm is taken away, then that's a huge plus. Also, there was concern about the Indo-Myanmar border, which goes via Manipur. So about 10 kilometers of that border has been fenced. That's what the government told the all-party delegate, representatives, and more work is being done. So These were the specific details that Home Minister shared with the opposition leaders, and also took in their suggestions with an open mind. But the big political question that is coming in is about the fate of N. Biren Singh, which was flagged off, like I said, by opposition leaders. Will BJP act on that? That remains the big question.
Absolutely, and that does remain the big question. But when we look at the ground situation, could you take us through what is the security deployment at the moment like, and what efforts are being made by the government to provide relief to those who have been displaced during this violence?
If I once again go back to what the Home Minister told the all-party, he said 36,000 security personnel have been deployed in the state, including 40 IPS officers and 20 medical teams that have been sent to ground zero. We do know that Kuldeep Singh, the retired DG of CRPF, he has been sent there as security advisor to N. Biren Singh. There's also Rajiv, who was IG of CRPF from the Tripura cadre. He was sent to Manipur cadre, and then subsequently he's taken over as DGP of Manipur. So there is, and also Vineet Joshi, of course, the Chief Secretary, he also was in the center before being sent there. So all of them are in touch with the center and with the state. But as far as ground situation goes, it's far from normal. What we are hearing from the ground is that there is complete breakdown of trust between the Kukis and the Meiteis. In the areas, the districts where the Kuki hillsides meet the Meitei valley, there is maximum problem, and the problem to the extent that Assam Rifles, BSF, Manipur Police, Army, they are finding it difficult to go on patrolling duties in this area. Often we are hearing reports about women folk coming out, stopping the security grid from going ahead, followed by civilians who have taken up arms or militias who have taken up arms, firing at the security forces. So the situation is grim, it is challenging. And I think the government is aware that when the parliament session happens, the opposition is bound to ask tough questions. That's why the government decided that, you need to take everybody into confidence to resolve the situation.
Absolutely. Many thanks to you, Arunima, for bringing in all those inputs. We will keep coming back to this story if there is more information pouring in. And with that, let's now shift focus over to Egypt, where Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has landed today after a monumental state visit to the United States. Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrived in Egypt upon the invitation of the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah El-Sisi. The Prime Minister was welcomed by Egyptian Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli. Prime Minister Modi also received a guard of honor at the Cairo airport. His visit to Cairo is extremely crucial for India's strategic interests in West Asia and North Africa. The two-day visit marks the Prime Minister's maiden state visit to Egypt after his maiden state visit to the US. And it also marks a first by an Indian Prime Minister since 1997 as far as an Indian head of state visiting Egypt is concerned. Now, apart from holding talks with Al-Sisi, Prime Minister Modi will also be meeting the Grand Mufti of Egypt, Ibrahim Abdel Karim, and will also be attending a round table with the Egyptian Prime Minister shortly. And just like in the US, Prime Minister Modi also received a rousing welcome by the Indian community in Cairo. But what stood out was his fan following among young Egyptian girls who also dressed up as Indians for the Prime Minister's welcome. An Egyptian woman welcomed Prime Minister Modi with the song Ye Dosti Hum Nahi Todenge from the film Sholay. Listen.
So I told him that I've never been to India before, and he also asked me like how did you learn Indian language? So I told him that movies and songs. Yeah, that's it.
आपको हिंदुस्तानी फिल्म में कौन सबसे ज़्यादा पसंद है?
सबसे फेवरेट
प्रधानमंत्री से मिलकर कुछ हुआ जब उन्होंने बोला कि आप तो भारत की बेटी लग रही है?
Yeah, he told me that we look like we're from India. There's no difference.
So how did you feel when you met the Prime Minister?
It was so good. Like when I saw him smiling, and I think he loved what I did. So I was so honored to like meet him.
We are all honored today, and we are like very happy. बहुत खुश रहे क्योंकि Prime Minister मिल गए. It's honor to Egypt. We as Egyptian, we like cherish and love the Indian culture, and and the Indian people, we like the Prime Minister said, we feel no difference between each other. We love like everything about India, their traditions, everything, and the people are so humble, and we feel like there's no difference. We get which each other, and no diversity, because we are all the same. So we are honored for the Prime Minister visit to Egypt.
Really, I'm proud of that, and of two culture also, Hindi and Egyptian. कभी-कभी महसूस है जब मैं इंडियन कोई मूवी देखती है, सीरियल देखती है कि हम एक हैं.
All right, so how significant will be Prime Minister's maiden state visit to Egypt, especially after he's grabbed international headlines in the United States? Let's try and get in a bird's eye view of this visit. And for that, let me introduce my esteemed panelists. I'm also joined in by Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, who is the former secretary at the MEA. I'm also joined in by Maha El Gamal, who's an Egyptian journalist. Robinder Nath Sachdev, who's an international affairs expert, joins us live as well. Many thanks to you. Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, if I could begin with you. In your years of experience, I want to know from you the trajectory of the India-Egypt relationship, one that we've seen blossom during the time of Prime Minister Nehru and President Nasser, but somewhere it meandered all the way from the 70s. It seems to be now reviving, and one significant role that's being played in this relationship is the people-to-people ties, something that Prime Minister Modi has skillfully managed as far as his charisma is concerned. We already have seen that kind of charisma in Washington, D.C. But how do you see Prime Minister now leveraging his power as far as soft power of culture and people-to-people ties is concerned to gain those hard outcomes?
I'm happy to say that in 1979, I began my diplomatic career in Cairo, where I was posted as a junior diplomat. I studied Arabic at the American University in Cairo. Anyway, that's a very personal memory that I have very fond memories of living in Cairo. And even then, I mean, I noticed that how the people on the street related to India. And I still remember people coming and asking me that, you look Egyptian, but where are you from? I said, I'm from India. So, and they would effusively greet you even on the streets. Those were the heydays of India and Egyptian, ties. There's a lot of emotional, cultural, sentimental value because of what Jawaharlal Nehru and President Nasser achieved as partners in the non-aligned movement. But yes, later on, as it happens, there are ups and downs, and later on, things kind of receded, and we had the end of the Cold War. Things changed, and Egypt also got absorbed with its own political problems. With they had an Islamic Brotherhood government in between, and India also, I think, took her eyes off the ball as far as Egypt was concerned. And can you imagine that since 1997, which is like 25 years, this is the first visit of an Indian Prime Minister.
Right, and that perhaps only goes on to indicate the level of increased engagement between both the countries, something that has been witnessed since last year, because we've seen high-level engagement take place between both the nations, and we will delve deeper into that. Let me bring in Maha. Maha, from you, I want to know what has been the sentiment like. You heard what Ambassador Chakravarti has to say. He's made a very valid point in terms of that special connect that both the countries have shared, something that was very apparent from that grand reception that Prime Minister Modi's received from the Indian community, and more importantly, Egyptian girls. And in fact, let me also dip into some footage that's coming in, live visuals coming in of Prime Minister Modi before I take on that aspect with Maha. All right, those are the latest visuals that we're bringing to you from Cairo of Prime Minister Modi in conversation with the Egyptian Prime Minister. Remember, this is going to be a very significant interaction, and shortly after this interaction will Prime Minister Modi be also presiding over a roundtable discussion, which will be not just presided over by Prime Minister Modi, but also by Mustafa Madbouli, who is the Prime Minister of Egypt. Right now, you can see there's a very serious discussion happening over there. Maha, if I could bring you in on this discussion that we are seeing right now, latest and live visuals coming in of Indian Prime Minister not only being greeted by the Egyptian Prime Minister first at the airport, and now in a serious discussion. It seems like a bilateral meet between the two. What is at the table for Egypt and India?
Hello, thank you for the interview. Yes, the importance for the Egyptian people, it's important to get this bilateral relations between India and Egypt because we have a history of the trade and also the culture. And if we can say now, the Egyptian president, when he visited India in January, he assured that the bilateral relations should be now a strategic one. So it's coming to another phase, which the strategic, and we mentioned the fighter air forces, the joint exercises of the air crafts of the air forces for the two countries. So this is also important point with also the global change and the economic crisis that Egypt maybe is facing now because of many points, especially after the Russian-Ukrainian invasion or war. So it's important for Egypt now to get this cooperation and bilateral relations with India. It's important and crucial, especially with the economic crisis, and also when India suggested that the countries that are facing a problem with or crisis in their economy, they can do this exchange with the local currencies between
Right,
the
Maha,
two
you've made
countries.
some
And I
very
think
valid points when it comes
Yeah.
to the kind of crisis
discussing
that that the world is witnessing, especially not just after the pandemic, but also after the war in Ukraine. There has been a major disruption to supply chains, and perhaps that's where India is also trying to step in to come to the rescue of countries like Egypt, which were heavily dependent on Ukraine and Russia, especially when it came to grain supply. 90% of the grain supply comes from Ukraine and Russia for Egypt. On that note, I'd like to bring in Rabindranath Sachdev. Rabinder, what can Egypt hope to achieve from India before I delve deeper into those strategic advantages that Egypt can provide India as far as the freight corridors and its geopolitical location is concerned? But I want to know from you, what can in fact India offer to Egypt?
Couple of things. Before that, one, the world of today is not only geopolitics, it's optopolitics. Images, culture mixed with, the interviews you had with our brothers and sisters in Egypt and their emotional connect with India, optics and geopolitics. So what we are seeing with Egypt and everywhere with India and everyone is optopolitics. One. Second, what can Egypt hope to achieve? And we can concrete. Egypt is in the market for about 70 aircraft deal of the Tejas kinds. We don't know where the exact decisions are heading. We are facing strict competition from the South Koreans, who are also becoming huge defense suppliers. The interesting thing is that India had offered Egypt a co-production or a joint kind of a deal with respect to the 70 aircrafts. Now, with Modi going to the US and us getting the jet engine deal, wherein the jet engines will also be made in India, I think India can be a very competitive supplier to Egypt for its aircrafts of the Tejas category and the trainer aircraft. So that's a huge potential right now. One concrete hard, that deal, good for Egypt, good for India via the US, because we have the jet engines being produced here. That's one. The other thing that Egypt is offering India, and that's great win-win for India, is that in the Suez Canal, Egypt sits there, they have a industrial zone. In that industrial zone, Egypt has offered India an industrial park and a port. In that zone, there are two, I think, Russian ports and industrial park. China has one. Egypt has offered India one also. I think we're going to take it up, how it works out, etc. But we will, or we could have a presence in the Suez Canal industrial zone with one port developed by India and an industrial park, maybe 10 acres, 20 acres. I think the Russian one is about 10 acres, whatever, for Indian companies to set up their base out there. These are concrete, hard, benefits that Egypt and us, we will both have.
Ambassador Chakravarti, if I could bring you in on when we talk about those key areas of strategic partnership between India and Egypt, something that was struck upon between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Abdel Fattah El-Sisi when he visited India in January during our Republic Day celebrations. When we look at that strategic partnership, what are those key components of that strategic partnership for the two countries?
I think trade and economic investment and defense cooperation would define the strategic partnership. Egypt, as you know, sits strategically across the Suez Canal, which is a very important sea line of communication for trade, etc. And there, Egypt is trying to get in manufacturing base in the Suez Canal industrial zone. And as we heard from the previous speaker, that India has been offered, which is a good thing, because from there we can market to Europe and other markets that India has. And definitely there is a good chance of that. The defense cooperation also, if it takes off, it will be a very important connect. India and Egypt have had defense cooperation in the past. Of course, it didn't proceed very much because of various reasons, where when Egypt looked away from from India, and then after the Camp David Accords, made deals with the USA, etc. So I think those are important factors that India and Egypt. I would place this in the larger context of India's diplomacy in the West Asian region.
Right.
India had focused more on Saudi Arabia and UAE.
Yes.
For obvious reasons. We have 8 million people working there. We have huge trade and we have oil sort of supplies, etc. So now Egypt, which is now the largest country in the region, more than 107 million people and a growing economy, but Egypt does not have the economic heft that the oil-rich countries have, and that is why we are talking about trade in currencies in different other than dollar. Egypt's dollar reserves are not very high, and hence convertible in rupee trade, etc. is being discussed. Right. But trade is something, and investment would be the main drivers of this relationship.
Absolutely, and investment perhaps from both ends. Ambassador Chakravarti, Maha, and Mr. Rabinder, I'm going to request you to continue to stay with me because we have lots to talk about. This is one partnership that is only growing from strength to strength. But for now, it's time to slip into a quick break. Stay tuned.
By news agencies, he urged his fighters to detain him. Now, reports also suggest that the security has been tightened in Moscow. Russian machinery chief Yevgeny Prigozhin claims his forces have crossed into Russia. Wagner founder says his forces have entered Russian border region and vows to go to the end to oust the Moscow top brass. Now, Biden briefed on developments in Russia. White House says now, Putin getting round-the-clock updates in connection with attempted armed rebellion that has been said by Kremlin. And Russian Wagner chief Prigozhin said, I quote, "We have crossed state borders. We'll destroy anything that gets in the way. We will go all the way till the end."
Мы воюем только с профессионалами. Но если кто-то встанет на пути, мы уничтожим все, что будет вставать на пути. Мы протягиваем руку каждому. Не нужно плевать в эту руку. Мы идем дальше, идем до конца.
Well, joining me on the broadcast is Patikrit Pan, security analyst. Patikrit, a very good morning to you. Well, what more details do we have on this breaking piece of input? And could you please help us outline for my viewers more details on this?
Prigozhin actually owns a private militia called the Wagner Group. Wagner Group has been fighting on behalf of the Russian armed forces. He is considered to be very close to Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia. But over the last few months, I think there are allegations, there are apprehensions that there are major differences that have cropped up between the Wagner Group chief and especially the defense minister of Russia. His name is Sergei Shoigu, and they wanted Wagner Group to sign contracts, which the Wagner Group doesn't want to sign. As it is, the Wagner Group actually operates pretty out of the basic contours in which Russian armed forces operate. Private militia is not generally allowed in Russia. But his intention to cross the border from the Russia-occupied Ukrainian regions in eastern Ukraine, the Donetsk region, into Russian territory, and his intention to go to Moscow, I think it's a little far-fetched. His armed force militia at most has 40 to 50,000 personnel, and I don't think most will be willing to take over the mighty Russian army, which is more than 1 million strong and has almost around 2 million reservists. So that kind of army, cannot be just taken over, and a coup cannot be done by a Wagner Group kind of an organization. So there are differences, but I think, Prigozhin has started becoming a little too overconfident that he can do the needful, whatever. And I'm sure certain Western elements will start imagining that this guy will do what the West could not do in terms of toppling the Putin regime. But I think he would eventually be arrested or something devastating would happen to him, because the Russian internal security forces are pretty well equipped to deal with this kind of situation. So it is important to see. It's interesting how this would have an impact on the Ukraine war, where the Wagner Group did play an important role on behalf of the Russian armed forces. So far as Putin's operations in Ukraine is concerned, I don't think it would have a tremendous or a very big impact. But yes, certainly it's a blot the Wagner Group was considered to be very close to Putin. This incident will definitely not go down well so far as Putin's reputation in terms of controlling these militias are concerned. Back to you.
All right, Pathikrit, help our viewers also understand how is this going to impact the relations with the West and have an impact on the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war?
Well, I think the war right now has entered a decisive, phase where the Russians are using heavy equipment, heavy offensive weapon systems. The Wagner Group consists mostly of mercenaries and militias. They did do a lot of important critical groundwork for the Russian armed forces at the initial stages. But now, where heavy machineries are being used, I think the Wagner Group has a limitation in terms of how effective they would have otherwise been. In fact, they are accusing the Russian armed forces of targeting their own personnel. I don't think it would have too much of an impact on the Russian or the war itself, but the West would be the West for...
Welcome back. You're watching Super Saturday. I'm Akanksha Swaroop, staying with our top coverage as far as Prime Minister Modi's visit to Egypt is concerned. Let me quickly bring in my guests on what's happening. And let me also give you a quick recap. Prime Minister Modi is currently in a roundtable discussion with the Egyptian Prime Minister. Maha, I want to bring you in as far as Prime Minister Modi's charisma is concerned, something we witnessed in the United States as well. What is the sentiment like towards the Indian Prime Minister in Egypt? We all know that Egypt has already conferred its highest award, the Order of Nile, on the Indian Prime Minister. That only adds to the feel-good factor. But having said that, we've also seen how he has this massive fan following within the Egyptian community itself, not just the Indian diaspora. Can Prime Minister Modi take or give that much needed boost to the existing India-Egypt relationship?
Yes, we can say that here we are facing maybe what's happening in the world, especially what's happening with the Russia and the US. I think Egypt is finding or trying to find alternatives now, strong alternatives internationally to like China, like India. This is mainly to enhance the situation and also to find alternatives for to help with the economic crisis and also with the political and now with the defense situation, because they have, as I mentioned before, Egypt and India has now the bilateral relations in defense too. So I think this is the Egyptian thinking now to find alternatives in the region also.
Right.
And the region also is thinking like the Gulf countries. They are also thinking of finding alternatives. And Narendra Modi, if we are speaking or talking now about what he can bring to Egypt, as we mentioned, the political scene, and also for the economic and the trade, also with the social culture, because we know that the Indian culture in Egypt is very famous, actually, and
in fact, Maha, if I may,
also attractive.
Right, it was in fact heartening to see how one of the young Egyptian girls crooned one of the Bollywood tracks, "Ye Dosti Hum Nahi Todenge," from the film Sholay for Prime Minister Modi. So it's only heartwarming to see the kind of role Bollywood has also had to play. We'll take in a word as far as Bollywood is concerned, but we'll do that later. But Rabindranath Sachdev, if I could bring you in on the kind of agreements we've seen being inked between President Al-Sisi and Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the month of January this year. There were 5 in total that included cyber security, even IT and culture. But how will Prime Minister Modi now take those agreements forward and strengthen this relationship even further?
if you'll allow me a poetic liberty, I think the Prime Minister will take it forward in his trademark AI perspective. And what I would say to that, which he said in the US, America, India, artificial intelligence, I think what Modi ji does is art of inspiration and art of imagination. So in a similar tone, we can expect that Prime Minister Modi and India will work and discuss with Egypt in terms of the art of imagination. And then let's inspire both our countries towards that one. Now, that's poetic, but coming down to concrete,
right.
Another hard deal which is in the works is the I2U2.
Yes.
Keep aside Israel, India, US, UAE, etc. But last month, there was a meeting with the national security advisors of Saudi, India, and a few other countries,
yes.
I'm forgetting to list them, to talk about a railway network in the Middle East connecting to India. Land, rail network, and then seaports, which will connect to India so that trade, etc. flows.
Right.
This is a counter to the BRI in some senses of China. The money would be, let's say, Saudi or whichever. Technology would be maybe US and all, GE engines or whatever. The engineering rights, our Rail India network and all would lay the networks. So Egypt could be an important node in that network flow of connectivity. That's one. Now, aside from the hard, on the economic side, Egypt is facing a problem. And let's be real, there are problems out there. Egypt has a huge problem with the economy. Egypt's economy, in some senses, is in a very sensitive situation right now. It parallels Pakistan's economy in some ways. The Pakistan economy is controlled by the Pakistan military and the Fauji Foundation. In Egypt also, majority of their infrastructure projects, infrastructure companies are owned or in semi-joint ventures with the Egyptian government or the state entities. The IMF has been telling them, de-link, and then we will give you the money, right? For the bailout. Right. That's a huge... And by the way, there's a vanity project, apparently. And we could ask Maha, I would love to ask this question. The new capital of Egypt, Cairo is the capital, but the new capital has been built up with about $60 billion of investments and all. It is supposed to be, from what we are given to understand as outsiders, a vanity project of Sisi to prepare for the next elections, to tell his country that, okay, we have economic woes, but, we are doing so good, so big infrastructure. Now, that project is sinking Egypt's economy also.
Right.
So there are some real hard facts.
And when we're talking about those hard facts, and since you said we should have Maha's inputs on that as well, Maha, how is politics playing a role as far as influencing the dwindling economy of Egypt is concerned? What is the sentiment like on ground zero towards the existing establishment, A, B? What is the establishment doing about the economy?
Yeah, are you asking about the internal political situation with the economy also and the strategy for the economy?
Yes. Yes, Maha.
Okay, so the economic crisis is big, and now Egypt is finding solutions also through the investment and encouraging more foreigners to invest in Cairo, foreign countries also, is trying to stop the currency deterioration, but it's becoming worse, maybe because of the World Bank and the issue with them.
So clearly, it seems that Egypt can gain out of this. It does seem like Egypt can gain when it comes. I'm sorry, Maha, I'm running short of time and there is a lot to talk about. But let me bring in Ambassador Chakrabarti also. Ambassador, let's now talk about India's outreach towards West Asia or Middle East. We just had Rabinder point out towards I2U2 as well. So far, it was Saudi Arabia and the UAE that used to garner attention from India. And as I was pointing out earlier, in the past few decades, we saw the relationship between Egypt and India sort of meander. But it seems that there's a fresh revival with much gusto coming in from India as well. What explains India's outreach towards Egypt?
I think one of them is economic. And, because India's economy is growing, these countries also want to trade with India, have investments in India and invite investments from India. And as I said, Egypt does play a major role there. Egypt is the largest country in the region with 110 million people. It's a large market for India. And hence, India has been looking at Egypt from that perspective as well. How to increase trade with Egypt, defense cooperation, because Egypt is also looking at India because Egypt has an economic problem today, because Egypt's economy is struggling, and Egypt needs, trading partners who are like India. And if India can give concessions on, let's say, trade in rupees and things like that, it will ease the burden on the foreign exchange reserves. Moreover, I think we talked about the alternative I2, U2, alternative to BRI and things like that. Yes, these are possible. I mean, the sea route and the railways, etc., that can be built to connect. So connectivity has always been an important aspect of promotion of trade, etc. But today, India is also looking at Egypt because Egypt does occupy a strategic position there. And India is a major trading partner of Egypt. India relies a lot on trade, and given the Suez Canal and the industrial zone, these are attractive propositions for Indian businessmen. And given the traditional warm relations with Egypt, these, and the cultural aspect, so it should not be difficult for India to seize some of these opportunities.
Absolutely.
And build upon the relationship that, but mainly it would be economic, I would expect.
Right. Rabindranath Ichdev, if I could bring you in on this aspect, how can India now build on, especially the kind of disruptions that have been caused by the war in Ukraine? Can India step in and perhaps give more options as far as diversifying that supply chain is concerned? This was right at the beginning of this discussion when I referred to how Egypt depends on Ukraine and Russia for its
one point I'd like to mention here, if I may, that is that India did provide wheat supplies to Egypt when the Ukrainian supplies had dried up.
Yes.
So India did step in and help Egypt out.
That is exactly what I'm coming to. Yes, Ambassador. I want Rubinder to also expand on that point because we've seen that happen last year. But can India now become a more reliable partner in terms of that much needed export of grain for Egypt is concerned?
Thank you so much. Yes, India could, but you see, the bottom line is that sometimes India, for its own, agriculture.
Right, we do have our own existing challenges, especially with our own population.
Unpredictable production. For example, wheat we could do, sugar we could do, but sometimes we cannot due to rains and all. But India should. Absolutely. However, I'd like to point out one more aspect of this relationship. So these are the hard things, right? Now, India, Egypt and Indonesia and Yugoslavia were founding members of the NAM, the Non-Aligned Movement.
Right.
That's a huge context. And even before that, India and Egypt, or via Egypt, knowledge transfer, the Library of Alexandria, the 0 digit reached Europe in around the 15th or 16th century or 14th century from India via Egypt. Okay, so knowledge transfer, what you were mentioning, cultural deep links, etc. We have those huge links and, legacy with Egypt. So we should be and we could be and we are leveraging those. That provides the basis and foundation. And then, of course, these are the challenges today we face. All of us face, all nations face. We also have our challenges. Egypt has, America has. Let us see how and where we can collaborate together. So I think that's where this is heading. With respect to India and Egypt, India has a huge, this song from Sholay about 30 odd years ago.
Right.
History is a huge foundational base, history and culture, on which we build with good intent for a win-win. We do understand that there are issues of economy of Egypt right now, but we do know from a geopolitical perspective that where we could invest, which could get us a little bang for our buck, and which could be very valuable for Egypt also.
All right. I'm in fact left with only 1 minute, and I'd like to take Maha's closing thoughts. Maha, let's end the discussion on a more heartwarming note, and I'd like to talk about how Bollywood has played a massive role in bridging that gap. In fact, I was going through some old pictures, and I found President Nasser present at one of the Filmfare award ceremonies in the year 1969, I believe it was. So it's heartwarming to see that how cultures had a huge role. Bollywood, something that we witnessed with that heartwarming welcome that Prime Minister Modi in fact received as well. Do take us through the cultural ties, which in fact go back to the fact that we are both, India and Egypt, two of the oldest civilizations in the world.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Yeah, for Bollywood, it's as I said, it's very famous here in Egypt, and I can remember when I was a child, I used to see the Indian movies on TV when we don't have, and cinemas when we don't have more channels. We have only 1 or 2 channels mainly, yes, this is what my generation was believing, that the Indian cinema.
Maha, have you watched any Bollywood movies?
Culture also. Yes, the Bollywood is more relative to or.
Which is your favorite Bollywood movie?
Yes. The movies. No, I'm speaking about, yes, the movies, and also the series or drama.
All right.
we saw
I'm so sorry to interrupt you there. I'm running short of time. I'll have to call it a wrap. It does seem like India and Egypt have a lot to share, not just in terms of hard bilateral deals, but it goes back all the way to people ties. And of course, Bollywood has been a major export as far as India's export to Egypt is concerned. Many thanks to you, Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, Maha El-Gamal, and Rabindranath Sachdev for joining in on Super Saturday. It's been a pleasure to have you on my show. And with that, it's a quick wrap. Thank you so much for watching.
Group kind of an organization. So there are differences, but I think, Prigozhin has started becoming a little too overconfident that he can do the needful, whatever. And I'm sure certain Western elements will start imagining that this guy will do what the West could not do in terms of toppling the Putin regime. But I think he would eventually be arrested, or something devastating would happen to him, because the Russian internal security forces are pretty well equipped to deal with this kind of situation. So it is important to see. It's interesting how this would have an impact on the Ukraine war, where the Wagner Group did play an important role on behalf of the Russian armed forces. So far as Putin's operations in Ukraine is concerned, I don't think it would have a tremendous or a very big impact. But yes, certainly it's a blot. The Wagner Group was considered to be very close to Putin. This incident will definitely not go down well so far as Putin's reputation in terms of controlling these militias are concerned. Back to you.
All right, Pathikrit, help our viewers also understand how is this going to impact the relations with the West, and have an impact on the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war.
Well, I think the war right now has entered a decisive, phase where the Russians are using heavy equipment, heavy offensive weapon systems. The Wagner Group consists mostly of mercenaries and militias. They did do a lot of important critical groundwork for the Russian armed forces at the initial stages. But now, where heavy machineries are being used, I think the Wagner Group has a limitation in terms of how effective they would have otherwise been. In fact, they are accusing the Russian armed forces of targeting their own personnel. I don't think it would have too much of an impact on the Russian or the war itself, but the West for the last, 14, 15 months have been hoping that something happens and some kind of regime change can be initiated in Moscow, they would wag their tails once again. But I don't think this would have any impact. As I said, Russia, the Wagner Group might be effective. They operated out of bound of the conventional rules that the Russian armed forces generally follow because of its proximity to Putin. But I don't think Prigozhin will have too many days to live.
Welcome back. You're watching Super Saturday. I'm Akanksha Swaroop, and in our live and continuous coverage of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Egypt, let me inform you, after a monumental visit to the United States, Prime Minister Modi arrived in Cairo. Today, he received a rousing grand welcome by the Indian community over there, and not just Indians, even Egyptians, especially young Egyptian girls, welcomed the Prime Minister in full force. At the moment, Prime Minister Modi is having a roundtable discussion with the Egyptian Prime Minister. Let's also bring you the kind of reactions that have come in from Egypt.
जैसे लोगों को पैशन होता है फिल्म स्टार से मिलने का, हमें पैशन है इंडियंस को यहाँ पे अपने पीएम को मिलने का. इट्स दैट काइंड ऑफ अ फीलिंग टुडे. अगर कोई फिल्म स्टार खड़ा कर दें और पीएम, तो पहले हम पीएम की तरफ भागेंगे अपने. वी लव हिम सो मच. ही इज हीरो फॉर अस actually.
Whichever country, whatever place he's traveled to, he's just made us extra proud. We feel very, very lucky and extremely excited. I think we are super proud as an Indian, and the level of pride just keeps on increasing with each aspect that he brings into the front. Not only which country he goes, but then the amount of warmth he gets or the amount of welcome he gets just shows how strong as a leader he's been over the last 8-9 years that he's been there, and I think there is just super pride in each of us.
It is really, first of all, it was a surprise कि भाई मोदी सर यहाँ पे मोदी जी यहाँ पे आ रहे हैं, और उसके बाद we really feel honored at the same time feel very proud कि मोदी सर यहाँ पे इतने सालों के बाद इंडियन पीएम यहाँ पे आए हैं. और all over the Egypt, हम लोग as Indians staying over here, everyone is talking to us कि आपका ये Prime Minister यहाँ पे आ रहे हैं, and all that makes us really feel very, very proud over here. That was another honor कि हम आगे ही खड़े थे, और सबसे पहले आए तो हमको हमारे सैयदा साहब का पूछा कि सैयदा साहब कैसे है. And the moment I said कि हमने भी पूछा कि साहब आपकी तबीयत कैसी है, आप कैसे हो, तो उन्होंने उनके लिए तो ऐसे ही बोले कि हाँ चलता है. But it was like really an honor कि भाई सबसे पहले सैयदा साहब कैसे है. And that was another thing which was really good for us to understand कि मोदी साहब इतना recognize करते हैं हमारे को.
देखो जी, ये जो फीलिंग जो इट्स ऑन अ सेकंड, फ्रैक्शन ऑफ अ सेकंड, वो इट्स लाइक अ वेव. जब आप खड़े होते और कोई मोदी जी जैसे जो ही इज ऑफ कोर्स एज वाइज इज सीनियर, हमारे इज लाइक अवर फादर. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल लेट अस टॉक ऑफ द ह्यूमन पार्ट, फिर दूसरे पार्ट के बाद आप प्रधानमंत्री है ये, लेकिन वो जो ह्यूमैनिटी है, ह्यूमिलिटी है, जो हमारे साथ जो मिक्स करते हैं, आई डोंट थिंक वी वुड हैव गॉट दैट अपॉर्चुनिटी इफ देयर वाज समबडी एल्स.
He is the leader of all the people in the world, not only for India. It's a big honor for us as well as for all the people of Egypt that Prime Minister Modi is here. Modi is India. And all my family members, all my colleague here, they were waiting for this visit for last 10 years. And at last, Prime Minister Modi came. Modi ji is great. Modi ji is great.
आज शायद ये दिन हमारे लिए बहुत ही भाग्यशाली दिन है. हमने कभी ऐसा सोचा भी नहीं था इतना अच्छा दिन हमारे को देखने को मिलेगा जिस दिन हमारे प्रधानमंत्री यहाँ पर आए हैं. और सिर्फ ये दिन नहीं, ये पूरे साल हम लोगों के जो रिलेशंस में इम्प्रूवमेंट है, और जो पिछले पूरे एक साल में यहाँ पर प्रेसिडेंट सीसी ने इंडिया विजिट किया, और उसके बाद आज प्राइम मिनिस्टर साहब आए, उससे पहले विदेश मंत्री जी आए, और जिस तरह का हमारा एक्सचेंज चल रहा है ये बहुत ही अच्छा है. और दोनों देश जो सभ्यताएं हैं, दोनों सभ्यताएं बहुत पुरानी है और दोनों में काफ़ी सिमिलैरिटी है. अगर आप यहाँ पर देखेंगे कि इंडियंस को इतना पसंद किया जाता है, इतना प्यार किया जाता है इंडियंस को, तो वो एक बहुत ही अच्छा भाव जो आज प्रधानमंत्री की विजिट से हमको बहुत ही अच्छा देखने को मिला.
प्राइम मिनिस्टर के साथ आज मिलना एक बहुत ही यूनिक एक्सपीरियंस था. और आप तो प्राइम मिनिस्टर साहब ऐसे भी बोरा समाज से बहुत ही नज़दीकी तौर से जुड़े हुए हैं और हमेशा जब भी वहाँ भी अमेरिका भी गए तो उन्होंने ऐसे ही बताया कि यहाँ से मैं आपके वहाँ जा रहा हूँ। और हमको बहुत पहली बार प्राइम मिनिस्टर को मिलके उनसे बातचीत करके उन्होंने हमारे बच्चों को भी हाथ लगाया, बच्चों से बात की, नाम पूछा हमारे बच्चों लोग को क्या नाम है। तो एक बहुत ही प्राउड फीलिंग हो रही है कि हमारे देश के प्राइम मिनिस्टर यहाँ पे आए हमको मिलने के लिए।
आज की फीलिंग्स हमारे लिए बहुत बढ़िया फीलिंग्स है। आज हमारे लिए एक काफ़ी सेलिब्रेशन का डे है। आज मोदी साहब यहाँ पर, जिन्हें पूरी हिंदुस्तान आज लव करती है, वो खुद आज यहाँ तशरीफ लाए हैं खुद, और इट्स अ ऑनर फॉर अस टू मीट हिम ओवर हियर। और सबको बड़ी बड़ी खुशियाँ हैं। सैयदना मोदी जी का, सैयदना साहब हमारे जो हिज ऑनरेस है डॉक्टर सैयदना मुफद्दल सैफुद्दीन साहब, उनके साथ आपका एक बहुत गहरी ताल्लुक का रिश्ता है, बहुत गहरी मोहब्बत है उसकी। आते के साथ ही पहला सवाल उन्होंने हमें ये पूछा कि सैयदना साहब आपके कैसे हैं।
Well, India and Egypt are two of the greatest ancient civilizations in the world, and our ties go back more than 4,000 years. In fact, our great emperor Ashoka in the 3rd century BC had referred to Ptolemy II in his edicts. We've had maritime contacts over the centuries, and in recent years, the relationship has gone from strength to strength, particularly after President Sisi and Prime Minister Modi both came to power in 2014. I must say that in Egypt, everybody is enamored of Indian culture.
Prime Minister Modi will be interacting with the Prime Minister of Egypt and the India unit of the cabinet. Prime Minister's other Indian meeting with the Grand Mufti, as also interaction with Fatih. Tomorrow, Prime Minister will be meeting with the President of Egypt, His Excellency Abdel Fattah El-Sisi. We will also be meeting, going to the Heliopolis Market Cemetery as well as to the Al-Hakim Mosque. We will share more updates as we proceed.
यहाँ पे इंडिया को बहुत लोग लव करते हैं, सब इंडियंस को बहुत ज़्यादा, हमें कभी फील नहीं होने देते कि हम किसी दूसरी कंट्री में हैं। बट येस, पीएम के आने के बाद एंड जो भी वेंचर्स हमारे होंगे नए, हमारे सीसी गए थे वहाँ पे, उनको भी बहुत हॉस्पिटैलिटी वार्मथ मिली जो हमारे पीएम को भी मिलेगी यहाँ पे। और आई थिंक बहुत ही अच्छा होने वाला है दोनों कंट्रीज़ के लिए, फॉर बिजनेस, फॉर एवरीथिंग। आई पर्सनली फील it's really a proud moment.
I think this is super special. This is the first visit of an Indian Prime Minister after 1997. So this becomes extra special. And I feel that this is like, we've been very lucky to have him during our stay here. So like excitement levels are like beyond explanation. We're just looking forward to seeing him and just having him here on soil for Egypt.
Today is a very, very proud moment for all of us. And I'm so glad that I've been here all these years and we're going to see our Prime Minister on this soil. For me, this country is as good as my own country because I've been here so long. And with Modi ji coming, it's like I'm having two countries together at one soil. So it's fantastic. And we are all very excited and happy that he's here.
When one talks about Prime Minister Narendra Modi's popularity, it goes beyond the Indian diaspora. Let's talk about what happened in the United States, in Washington, D.C. American singer Mary Milburn touched Prime Minister Modi's feet and sought blessings after singing India's national anthem at the Ronald Reagan Center. Mary Milburn's performance of the Indian national anthem has taken everyone by surprise. CNN News 18's Shivani Gupta spoke exclusively with the American singer. Let's listen into what she has to say.
Mary Milburn, American singer who's used to performing for American presidents and world leaders, sang the Indian national anthem in the presence of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in his final engagement in US. Mary is joining us live on CNN News 18. Many congratulations first up for that wonderful rendition. And, you know, the entire country is raving about it. Everybody here is very touched. It was early morning, but, you know, everybody's seen it. And the one thing that the entire country is talking about is that gesture of you touching the Prime Minister's feet. You know, of course, you've talked about it on your Twitter, but I do want you to explain to our viewers what made you do that.
Well, Shivani, it's so great to see you, and thank you for having me on. It was such a special night. I'm still a bit speechless, to be quite honest, this morning here in Washington, D.C. When I woke up early this morning, I kind of pinched myself and said, did that really happen last night? Was I really singing on stage next to the Honorable, His Excellency, Prime Minister Modi, who I have such admiration and respect for, and being given the opportunity to perform last night for the Prime Minister's concluding event for the State Oracle was, I have to say, probably one of the highlights of my career to date. He is such a remarkable man, a very kind, humble man. He's a true man of the people, and you all know that being in India. But I tell you, it was beautiful for the United States this week to see India, the Indian culture on full display, to really see the vastness of the Prime Minister, his leadership, and what he's doing in the country that is certainly contributing to the U.S.-India relationship. And so last night, in my studies, I have to certainly thank my Hindi coach, Dr. Mokshraj, who not only is my Hindi teacher, but he served as the cultural diplomat at the Embassy of India in Washington, D.C. for years. So he's a go-to certainly as a teacher for learning culture and things like that. And so in our beginning classes, we sat down and talked a lot about the traditions and the values of India. And one of those traditions I learned about was certainly the respect for elders. You certainly see that prominently in the films and in all of the media and things like that, in the context as an American learning the values of taking care of your elders and respect to your elders. And so I was so touched as I would watch that in the films, and as Dr. Mokshraj and I would talk about how elders are respected in that type of form in country. And so knowing I was going to share some time on the stage with the Prime Minister, and I wanted to publicly honor him. I wanted to publicly show my appreciation to him for his leadership, but as my elder. And I knew the Secret Service folks well, so I knew that they wouldn't get too nervous. Because I want to be respectful, certainly, of the Secret Service and the security. But it was just a moment that I wanted to express to the Prime Minister, and certainly to India and the Indian communities across the world, that this is a tradition that not only Indians carry it to heart, but we all carry to heart in the context of honoring a great leader as the Prime Minister. I learned that touching the feet of elders is touching their hearts. So